You're listening to WJHS 91.5 The Eagle. Welcome to Media in the Making, a podcast where we look at the evolution of media from the 1800s all the way to present day. In this podcast series, we ask how different forms of media evolved and changed culture. Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's take a step back in time. Grab the plate with your text and fasten it between the pieces of wood. Then you grab your ink roller and spread the ink on the metal plate so it's ready to press. You push the paper and it's hold under the devil's tail and pull to make the ink stick to the paper. Now you have your 19th century newspaper. This is an example of my topic today. I'll be explaining to you the news boom in the 19th century and all that came because of it, and the new inventions during that time. My name is Jane Jones, a student at Columbus City High School. You're probably wondering why the newspaper is even important, since we mostly get our news either from the internet or from our phones, so why should we care? Well, it began before the boom even started, way long ago. The newspaper was the main way back then that people could either communicate or share news around the area or country. Back then, it was also the best way of entertainment. You would buy a newspaper for whatever they would offer it, and it would probably be the most interesting thing you'd see all day, because they didn't have any way to learn this stuff. Before the boom, the printing technology was pretty basic. They used a printing press. A printing press was a machine that would take paper and a metal plate or letters and press them both together to get words stuck on there. And people would press these by hand every time they would make a newspaper. It wasn't very effective, and they didn't make a lot of newspapers at this time, just a small amount per day. Then once they had made it, they would get a few boys to go out and try to sell the newspapers. Not many, but enough to get people to buy some so they could stay in business. But it all changed when the boom started, and the steam-powered printing press came out, and because of that, changed the newspaper industry forever, causing the news boom. The steam-powered printing press, it was mostly automatic, and it was able to produce 800 sheets per hour. It would do all of that in the work of a normal person what the printing press could do at double the speed. It made it so it was way quicker. Because that invention ultimately changed how the news boom would start, and the postage system erupted, making it on a large scale. The newsies became a prevalent thing, and there was a lot of them roaming around the city, selling newspapers for their own profit. They would buy newspapers cheap and then sell them for a profit, and what they didn't sell, they could give back to the company for whatever they paid for it. They'd also have delivery boys giving newspapers directly to the people's homes, so they didn't have to find a newsie every day. Then it started to get things on their papers that made newspaper growth even bigger, and that was pictures. These pictures are not what you think. They weren't on there by a camera. They didn't have technology back then. So what they would do is hire a guy who was an artist who would carve pictures into rubber and then use that piece of rubber and press it into the paper thing. And then that picture would be on newspapers. It wasn't always like that, because it changed in the 20th century when they made the first working camera and started taking that film and putting out newspapers. It was a lot easier than the rubber carving and a lot cheaper. One main thing that fueled the news boom was the newspaper itself. The information it shared was very extraordinary and helped people around the world. It had many huge titles, such as First Train Operates in England, 1804, Charles Darwin Articulates the Theory of Evolution, 1859, the Suez Canal Opens in 1869, Alexander Graham Bell Invents the Telephone, Battleship Maine sunk in Havana Harbor in 1898, Nelson defeated French and Spanish fleets in Trafalgar in 1805, President Lincoln assassinated in 1865. Confederate troops fired upon Fort Sumter in 1861. Lee suffered major defeat at Gettysburg. Napoleon defeated at Waterloo in 1815. All these news titles of the 19th century impacted people politically or were just for news in the country they live in. It was the biggest source of media then, and because this influenced people to a huge degree. It did many things like changing someone's stance on a president or maybe your side on a war, or even going as far as deciding on religion. Some of the news titles I use can justify it, like Lincoln's assassination. Because of newspapers, this word would never got out, people wouldn't have been changed, or for their political stance of the newspaper. Confederates fired upon Fort Sumter. People were probably shocked if they read that, but would have never known for a long time without newspapers and media. You're probably thinking, yeah, well, that's old. Nobody reads newspapers today, and that's where some kids are wrong. 56 million newspapers are still old daily talking about events going on now. News evolved so much in the 19th century, it's crazy. It continued to grow into what it is now, a huge industry that helps people understand what's happening and helps them make a profit. It's a win-win scenario between the company and its consumers. And who knows, maybe it'll evolve someday into something even bigger. Maybe even no paper at all. We won't know until it comes out. Media Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy media classes. Media in the Making, teaching about the evolution of media throughout history, its effects and culture. For more from the students, more podcasting series are on 91.5 website and WJHS